Welcome to this week's installment of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale with Don Henninger. I'm Don. With me is my podcast partner, Professor Kevin Maxwell.
Hello, Headmaster Henninger.
You got Headmaster in.
Yeah.
Oh, you're good, man. I'll tell you, you're good.
Not bad.
Hey, have you caught your breath yet from our number 100 last week?
That was great, wasn't it?
Isn't that awesome?
Oh, so much fun. So much a great turnout. Such good feedback. It was really cool.
We had, so that for those who don't know, and there's probably a few of you out there because it got a lot of attention on social media, and it was in the papers too, which is kind of cool. We did our 100th podcast. We had a big gang here to help us do it. We interviewed about 12 people, so make sure you listen to last week's episode with all kinds of cool people doing great things in our city. So that was pretty good.
I thought it was cool how the people we interviewed, a year and a half ago came back with and gave us updates on what they were talking about on the podcast then, and a lot of progress on a lot of really cool projects.
We had some breaking news in there, so stay tuned for that, right? So that was pretty cool. Yeah. So today we begin our second century of podcasting, addressing an important topic, a really important topic, and that's the M&O Override election coming up for the Scottsdale Unified School District. Two guests with us today, Libby Hart-Wells, a member of the governing board, and Patty Beckman, former governing board member and co-chair of the Yes to Children's campaign, which is supporting the override. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Good to see you catching your breath because I know you're both working hard. This is a big issue, really important for our community. So first, a note of gratitude to both of you for your service, not only to what you're doing with this campaign, but to our school district overall and to our community. It's not easy these days being a leader, and you both have done that admirably. So many thanks to what you're doing for our community, for our schools. So voters are going to be asked in a special election this November 7th to approve a maintenance and operations override for the district. So Libby, why don't you start off and give us some background on what the override is and what it's for and why it's needed.
Sure. First, let me again thank you both for the invitation and dedicating a coveted spot of your podcast for the Scottsdale Unified School District. Again, I really appreciate that. As well, congratulations on that business milestone, your 100th episode.
Thanks.
Sorry to have missed your festivities.
You.
I heard it.
You were on before, so you're
great.
part of our success story. So thank you for being part of that.
Well, thank you. So just first, some context, I think, having said in some of the town halls that the district has hosted around in the different learning communities of the school district, there were some, I think, maybe just some foundational pieces of information that might be helpful. So with respect to K through 12 education funding in the state of Arizona. One thing maybe folks we kind of jump right to the override and there's percents of numbers, and the base, kind of what those percents are based on, is what is called a revenue control limit. And the Arizona legislature funds Arizona's district schools in a formulaic way. So everything's established through formula. There are a number of variables, there are weights, students, depending on their grade level, is weighted differently. Their academic level is also weighted plus or minus up or down. Kinder is only factored at half day. That is not a full day proposition in the state of Arizona yet. Pre-K is not subsidized at all. Special education, Title I, all of this is different, right? These are all different buckets of money. But the base amount is what's called a revenue control limit. And so that number is a fixed number. And so when we talk about overrides or bonds, any traditional district school in the state of Arizona, that percent is the percent of the revenue control limit. So one thing I had observed in hearing some reasonable questions was, you want 15% more, you want 15% more. 15% of the revenue control limit. So this is not a limitless amount of money that comes to the school districts, but rather it's up to a cap, which is the percent of the revenue control limit. And voters may have remembered last year on the ballot, there were a number of choices to make on the ballot, one of which was a question on a different kind of override. There are two types of overrides, and bonds are different. And if you look at your property tax bill, you'll see a different line for bonds, not just for Scottsdale Unified, but also for Maricopa County Community College District, for the city of Scottsdale, and you will see one for SUSD. What we're talking about on the ballot this year is one of the two types of overrides. Last year, we had a district additional assistance. That's a very wonky name. Colloquially, we refer to that as capital. override because it pays for things. If the HVAC goes out, the cooling system goes out, that's the expenditure. That's the bucket of money you can use to fix those. And they tend to be high dollar capital expenditures. So, and that happens. The air conditioning goes out and has gone out.
Especially this year, right? Yeah.
Right.
The monster summer that we just had.
So, or there's just something, Navajo, the fire. These are the kinds of
Building
expenditures.
stuff. Yeah, real capital stuff. Yeah.
What we're looking at this year is something completely different, which is people. And that's what that M&O, we call it the M&O, and Don correctly defined as the Maintenance and Operations Override. And that Maintenance and Operations Override is permitted under state law by the state legislature up to 15%. It's capped up to 15% of your revenue control limit. Again, that base funding amount. When you look at that property tax bill that you've just got recently, we just got ours last week, you'll see 3 lines for the Scottsdale Unified School District. The top number is the lion's share of the amount of property taxes that goes to SUSD. That's the revenue control limit. That's your base amount. That is the general fund. That's in lieu of a general fund from the Arizona State Legislature. That is what Scottsdale Unified gets.
So that revenue control is always going to be there.
It's always going to be there.
No matter what happens politically in the community, whatever, you're always going to see that revenue control limit on your property tax bill.
And it will look like it's a tax levied from the Scottsdale Unified School District. What it really is the legislature saying, this is how much money you get, Scottsdale Unified, and you can get that from your property taxes of your community. And if you don't get to the max that we said you could have, the revenue control limit number, then they'll top you off from the general fund. That doesn't happen in Scottsdale because property values are so high.
Right.
So Scottsdale Unified School District is what's called a non-state aid district. And there are others around the state, but Scottsdale is one of them. The other 2 lines that you'll see for SUSD is bonds, and the other one's override. Those overrides are the capital, and the M&O.
People.
M&O is people.
Big people.
Yes.
Right.
And so and actually I think Patty, we both were parents in the district when the override, before 2019, when the voters did pass the current override, and what happened. And there were some consequences on our kids, on our teachers, on our community. But the voters passed in 2019 a maintenance and operations override up to 15% of the revenue control limit. That revenue control limit changes each year. And so that's the override that we are asking voters to continue. No new taxes. It stays the same. The revenue control limit will change, but the ask and the amounts and the allocations of those funds are all staying the same of what was approved in 2019.
So let me ask you this, because a lot of people are not as deep into this issue and know it as well as you, because there's a lot of moving parts as we see right here. There's a lot going on right there, right? So, Patty, when you're out talking to people and you've done some town halls, how much of this do people absorb, and how much do you really talk to them maybe in more simplistic terms and say, this is for people? It's not for things, it's for people. But what's the reaction when you start talking to folks and explain, like Libby just did? She did a wonderful explanation of what it is, but it's pretty deep and pretty complicated. How do people receive that? I mean, what's the reaction?
Well, I think primarily it's received very positively. I mean, we're fortunate that we live in a school district where people really support our schools and believe in public education. As Libby pointed out, and I appreciate her giving the background because there has been some misunderstanding along the way, some verbiage that, it's just more money when it is not.
Right.
In fact, it is a continuation, as she said, of the same exact tax rate, which is our secondary tax rate. Again, to answer your question and then move on, people receive it positively. I know that they want fiscal transparency. I know people are concerned about taxes. I know every rational person wants to know how their money is being spent. Sure. I think the district, regardless of your feelings about leadership, the board, et cetera, has done a really great job at being transparent in the way they've spent their money. You can go right to the district's website, and whether you're great at finding things or you see it right off the top, there is a dashboard that's very transparent that tells you how we've spent all of the money that we have received, whether it's M&O funds or, as Libby pointed out, district additional assistance money or the last override or a bond. I mean, I remember when I was on the board and I was fortunate to witness us do some incredible rebuilds of our K-5 schools with the bond issuance that our taxpayers approved back in the day. And we detailed that for every taxpayer to see where every single dollar was going. So again, to answer your question, I believe people are receiving the conversation positively.
Good.
They have a few questions. It is their money after all, and we welcome that. But I would encourage everyone, if they are confused or they're hearing something that just doesn't quite add up to supporting the excellence we've known in Scottsdale, to reach out. Reach out and get the information for yourself from the district, from the superintendent or the board. Don't just listen to a neighbor who may not be as informed or may have good intentions, but just doesn't know.
They don't know. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Can I just add a little bit to
Please.
that?
No,
Yeah.
please. Yes.
So just to kind of double down on the transparency and how the district has been, making available almost in real time expenditures, particularly under the bond, for example. You can go to the website. There's a spreadsheet you can access as a community member, and you can see every amount and in what school and who to whom, the vendor, and for over the course of the 5 or 6 years. And the last of the bond wrapped up this year. There was the last rebuild. It was
Pueblo.
Elementary.
Is that right?
Viva
Wow.
Pueblo.
Okay. Yeah.
And a
That's great.
significant renovation down at Tavon Elementary too, and they look fantastic and beautiful, and appreciative communities. And I agree. I just was second what Patty had said. The community has, in my experience, been very supportive of the Scottsdale Unified School District, and it's not lost on folks here in this community. The property values are tied to your schools.
Right.
Right. Business site prospectors are not looking for localities that don't have great schools.
It's the first thing businesses ask.
That's
What's the
right.
status of the school system there before we
Absolutely.
think about moving there or bringing our employees there?
That's right.
That's
and
really
there's
important.
there's a straight line
Yeah.
from great schools and strong local economies. And SUSD does that. In fact, I'm taking over your podcast here. Sorry. but I
Take it
gotta
over.
get
This is for you guys. You take it over. If we don't have to ask any questions, we're happy.
You want to
campers.
re-record the intro? We can do that too if you want.
We're pretty passionate about this.
That's
Keep
right.
going. I love this. This is great.
Just want to make sure I share with all of your listeners.
We'll jump in when we need to. Don't worry
Okay.
about it.
Yeah.
All right. The district had actually procured a economic impact study, and that economic impact study, just talking about property values and the economic impact of great schools like those in the Scottsdale Unified School District, is what that was determined was for every $1 invested in SUSD, there's an economic impact return to the state of Arizona of $5. So that's a pretty darn good dividend.
No, I'd say it's a good in return. Are you kidding
And there's
me?
lots
Yeah.
of great data. I'm a numbers person, so I love this,
Yep.
and you can see
Yeah.
my notes all over the place here. But there's some really powerful numbers here. And just talking, again, circling back to the bond, there's the direct, and then there's kind of like imputed impact, right? Labor, when you're building a new school, and the impact that has, the positive impact, thousands of jobs just here in Maricopa County as a result. And I think our constituency is very savvy, financially savvy, and they get that investment and the return, and they see it.
Well, and that's one of the things I think that makes Scottsdale a great community is the quality of our schools and what they've given back. And when you start talking about numbers with the investment and the return we get for that, there's all the proof you need, right? Pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I like about this is we're talking about people. So let's dig into the people aspect of this a little bit, Patty. And when we talk about people, who are we? We're talking about kids and class size and teachers. So explain how this money would be used for that.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that because that's specifically why we're here, right? Is to touch on people, specifically young people. We'll talk about a few things that this is going to impact, and one that's near and dear to my heart right off the bat is the arts in our K-5 schools. We don't always, or every school is not fortunate enough to have the funding to provide things like arts programs for kids at a very early age. And we know how impactful that is. You can read many studies talking about that speak to kids when they learn the arts early on or they're exposed to it, how it touches on both sides of their brain and they're academically more predisposition to receive things as they grow. My kids were arts kids. I know they went to Kiva Elementary, and they were fortunate enough to be exposed to choir and orchestra at a very early age. But I will tell you, 2014, 2015, unfortunately, the override didn't pass. And so the alternative choices were made at the district level, and the board decided to go to half-day Wednesdays in the school district and also cut the arts and specials in our K-5 elementary schools. The district lost over 1,000 kids that year, and there was a significant consequence to that because parents have choices.
Sure.
We welcome choices. We want to. We
Right.
think it raises the bar for, for everyone across the board. But I will tell you, we stuck it out, and it did come back. But there was a significant impact to all of our children. So getting back to your point, it funds things like that. It funds the people that, we employ to expose our children to the arts in our schools. It funds all-day kindergarten. As Libby pointed out, the state does not.
Right.
So it funds all-day kindergarten, some of our athletic programs, keeps the student-teacher ratios down. We are fortunate that we have lower student-teacher ratios than many of the districts across the state. So when we talk about it touching on actual people, those are just the very top line impact.
Right.
It drills down from there. I don't know if Libby, if you have anything to add.
I do. And actually, just to second what Patty had commented, being a parent in the district and actually having younger children in the district when the override didn't pass and those the specials were cut, every Wednesday was a half day Wednesday.
That was difficult.
It was very difficult. It was very stressful as parents with schools leaning more on PTOs to do things. That's not the kind of experience any of us want our children to have in school. So the impact is real. And actually there was a reasonable question at one of the town halls that was, we hear these disaster scenarios, but is it really going to happen? And actually, several of us who were parents, who are parents in the district said, you bet. And if you have young children and you're trying to work, it's really hard to figure out what your child care situation is going to be once a week,
100%.
when you're planning that. So those are indirect consequences that reverberate throughout our entire community and have costs associated with them, right? But second to the arts, so you had world languages, music, arts, that some of the co-curricular activities, which would be like robotics, band, choir, those specialty clubs are all covered by this override. Those are the stipends that get paid to support those programs. Some coaches, and that's the second kind of have weighted amount of the override in terms of allocation of funds. But the first one, and Patty touched on it, and that is the lion's share of this override supports maintaining current class ratios, so student to teacher ratios. So that's people. The amount of what happens if this doesn't pass, and let's just put some numbers on it. The override currently yields to the district around $22 million a year. And that's where the money's going. It's exactly what the voters were told in the 2019 pamphlet. It's going to look exactly the same when you get your pamphlet on October 11th. I already got my alert from the county recorder that
I did too. They're in the mail.
Right.
Yep.
So the county recorder's on top of it, as they always are.
Hold on, that's another podcast, by the way, but please keep going.
Okay. So 40%, so that's teachers. So let's look at that $22 million. If we as a district have to cut $22 million, it's a phase down. So you do it over the course of 3 years. That is the equivalent to 125 full-time teachers.
Ouch.
And I just happened to be at the Desert Mountain Learning Community, which is my learning community where my kids go. And Dr. Lisa Hirsch, who's the principal of Desert Mountain, kind of put a fine point on this. Some of the questions that were being asked about, putting that in perspective, what does that mean? Well, it means every teacher at Desert Mountain gets laid off. So, there's significant consequences. And unfortunately, it's because that revenue control, and kind of going back to the top of the podcast, is insufficient to fund adequately education here in Arizona, state of Arizona. And there are plenty of national reports to verify that statement. So we are in a blessed position to have a community that supports our schools and have been able to do these kinds of things.
So, Libby, I wanted to touch on something because you've reminded me that something that has come up about kind of the process. people have said, oh goodness, if it doesn't pass, why are you telling us that immediately we're going to go to half-day Wednesdays, we're going to do this? That is a governing board decision. And so we cannot predict what exactly would happen should this not pass and we lose the funding, but we can tell you it will be significant.
Yeah.
$22 million is a significant amount of money to this school district. So when we talk about these programs, we talk about decisions that have been made in the past, just to give you some sort of relevance of what would potentially happen in the future. As Libby pointed out, it is not something that can just be absorbed.
Yeah.
We don't have cash accounts that we can just go draw from that can supplement, the loss of something like this. So that while we cannot specifically point to what will be gone or what will happen should this not pass, our district will definitely feel it.
Because those decisions will be made later on.
Correct.
By the board, by the school board, the
Correct.
superintendent, people like that, right? His staff.
Yes.
Right, yeah.
There's no rainy day fund here.
No.
And speaking of that, wouldn't it be nice, Kevin, if the state legislature would finally figure out how to fund schools across our state? Would say you wouldn't have to wrestle with this so much all the time,
Wouldn't
right?
it be
And
great?
fix the overall system a little bit.
And we are
fund it?
fortunate that our taxpayers have typically said yes because they do believe in this. But Don, for 2 seconds, you just touched on something else that's kind of a misconception, that we have a rainy day fund. We have cash accounts in our district that we have been using over the last couple of years to offset any expenses that we could actually use them for.
Yeah.
Back when I was on the board, we did establish some policy around what we could let the cash accounts go down to and what we could let them go up to before we actually touch them. And believe me, they're being used. So the misconception that we have enough cash laying around to offset should this not pass, that is inaccurate.
Yeah, it's a cash flow issue, right? Basically, yeah.
So, and actually, just to kind of build on, and Patty oftentimes said this when you were on the board, to point out that these cash accounts, they're not fungible. They are, you're able to use the funding for usually a very specific set of purposes. They are not fungible. It's not like just having a savings account that you can go in and then offset any kind of losses anywhere else. But we have this override now. And on top of that, you have a number of moving parts also just in state budgeting. We have some phase downs, right? Results-based funding is going away, and Scottsdale Unified School District is a strong beneficiary of that program. That's going away. Some Prop 123 money is also going away. The COVID relief money needs to be spent down by next September. So there's a number of moving parts here, and it is in most of these funds that you'll see, and you can see the budget for the school district. All you have to do is call or put on the website. Are not fungible. So
Good to know. So, Patty, you're chair of the campaign to get this all happening. Here we are. It's about October, right in the beginning of October. This will be October by the time this airs. A couple of days into it. What's the month ahead look like? What's the plan?
It's a busy one. You will see significant movement in our district with a lot of our citizens that truly believe in the school district and what we're doing step up and make statements in the paper and quotes that you're going to see going around social media, et cetera. If you have questions about the override, et cetera, you can always reach out to Yes for Children, and we'd be happy to come speak to maybe a party that you're having in your neighborhood, et cetera, inform your neighborhoods. I will be remiss if I don't remind everyone loud and strongly, this is an all mail-in election.
Yeah.
Your ballots are going to
True.
drop August
Right.
11th. Please look for it. Do not think it's just junk mail. It is really important. And the actual election itself is November 7th. So please turn that in. It is an all mail-in, which is different.
So October 11th is the ballot when the ballots
Correct.
drop? Okay,
Yes.
good to know.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, one of the best columns I've seen written by anybody in support of this is written by this guy across the table from me, Kevin Maxwell. Well done, Kevin.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean,
We
you
can
dug into some
always-
issues.
Thank you. Honestly, you have been a supporter of this district, you and your wife, for as long as I can remember.
Yeah.
So, Kevin,
Well,
thank
it's
you.
easy to do because it's it champions itself, really. All you got to do is point out the glaring successes that are right in front of you. And it's really rewarding to get behind schools, kids, education, and something that we really know does impact our community. So it's pretty easy, actually.
So how many, you've done some town halls. And how has that worked out? And have you done them at high schools and locations? And do you have more to come?
Actually, the last one wrapped up last night at Chaparral High School.
Chaparral, okay.
Dr. Menzel and Ms. Crozier, the CFO for the district, hosted these town halls. They were open to the public. answer any questions. Now, the district is not advocating yes or no. Those town halls were to provide accurate, factual information to the voters, and that is it.
Yeah.
I've attended 3. I wouldn't say they were well attended, but there were certainly some folks from the community that probably did not have children in the school district, and that was the whole point of offering up those town halls, is to be in your community and offer an opportunity to provide facts. And that was those were well appreciated. I think they were well appreciated, and this parent well appreciated them.
Yeah. Patty, have you seen any opposition yet? Have you seen anybody that's popped up yet in organized groups that are funded or anything?
I wouldn't say anything that's specifically organized. I would say from an oppositional standpoint, and I don't even know if that is an accurate word at this moment. I think there's people that are not quite as informed as they need to be, and they're kind of digging in with some misinformation and asking some very significant questions, which for me are welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
I really, before you carry forward and take misinformation to 15 of your neighbors, I would rather you come to a town hall event and stand up and ask and get your question answered.
I asked because I think that Fountain Hills has a bond measure on the ballot.
Yep.
I think there is some significant opposition in that area, and they have some signage out. I think some of it, I don't know if it bleeds into Scottsdale, but since that you're driving up Shea Boulevard on that border, when you start to cross into Fountain Hills, there's some signs of opposition, and there's some confusion, I think, because one of the opposition sides, talks about raising taxes, and we know that this M&O override will not raise your taxes a dime. It will only continue what you've already been funding since 2019. Is that correct?
Yes,
correct.
but let's be clear about a few things, Kevin, because Libby touched on it earlier. This is not a bond issuance. When I have to tell people that, please understand, a bond issuance is when the district is coming and asking you if they can borrow money.
Right.
This is not a bond issuance. This is a continuation of the override, and there is a difference. But and this is where we like to inform people: your tax rate, and I'm emphasizing rate, is staying the same. If your property value has increased from last year to this year, even if that rate stays the same, the incremental amount that you will pay in taxes may have gone up because your property value has gone up.
Which is a good thing.
Yes, of course. And it's probably gone up because we have strong schools as
Right.
well.
Good
So
point.
I would argue that the two are related. But remember, the rate is staying the same. So when people say, what are you saying? This is an increase. I'm paying more. Well, maybe your property has gone up, and that's why, again, a good thing. But the tax rate is staying the same. The massive tax increase signs that you were seeing out there, I'm having a feeling people were a little bit confused, and that was somewhere else and has nothing to do with Scottsdale.
Yeah.
So
That's why-
actually, Kevin, to that point, I live in the community that
Yeah.
you're referring to, where those signs had crept their way down Shea Boulevard. And actually the city went out and reviewed those, and they were non-compliant with election laws anyway. So I don't know how organized. It definitely was misinformation with respect to our override.
Right.
I don't know what the bond situation is in Fountain Hills, but you do see them if you head up go to the
just
line.
so anybody who's driving up Shea Boulevard, understand that anything you see in opposition, it may or may not. Yeah, it shouldn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today.
Right.
Correct.
Let me ask Patty this question. Does this thing have full support from the governing board right now?
That's a really good question. In fact, we have a member right here.
I'm leaving Libby out of this for a reason, but she can come back in a second if she wants.
So what I was told is that we had a 4-1 vote, and the person that did not vote for said they needed a little more information and couldn't quite get behind it at that time. And I'm not going to speak for that individual.
Okay.
A couple months ago?
I believe so. And, I'm not going to try and put Libby in a difficult position.
That's why I asked you.
Yeah. Board members vote about how they feel like voting at the moment in time. This, for me, is an important issue to get behind. I would have liked to have seen a 5-0 vote, and I would have liked all governing boards members to be as informed as they possibly could to make a vote either way and come out strongly with reasons why and stand behind them. But this is what I was told where we are.
I'll just comment in general. When the board votes, regardless of the vote disposition, it is a vote of the board. So the vote of the board was to approve the override. That is a support of the whole board.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter individually what you think. We only have any right, authority as a whole, a collective whole, and the
100%.
collective whole voted in support. So yes, this board supports this override and supports these kids.
With you.
And I will say to support that. When I was on the board, I was very proud to remind people that even if a vote did not go my way, I had taken an oath to support that outcome and not to go out and undermine the vote that the board had
That's
passed.
right.
Good
That's
point.
right.
Good point.
Yeah. Can you guys talk a little bit about the timing of this? Because I think there's some people who might have some question about the timing because they remember we just did this last year. Now, you talked about two different kinds of overrides, the DAA and then M&O. And we approved a DAA last year, and now we're doing M&O now. Do you think the timing is not great or could have been better? Or I don't know if there's any, we didn't really have an option, I guess, did we? But
And fair enough. I think that's a fair question. Why, we just did this. Well, what we did was something different, a different bucket of money, a different bucket of possible expenditures.
Different consequences for not passing it.
That's right. That's right. That one didn't have a year leeway. The administration felt strongly that a couple of factors. One was to try to avoid getting caught up in a bigger general election.
Right.
A lot of vote attrition as you move down the ballot, and typically these kinds of questions end up at the very end, and not everybody completes their whole down ballot. So to increase the chances that people were going to see and sincerely consider their vote, going early so that it's the only thing you see. Now there's risks with that, as you pointed out, and as Patty pointed out. And the other was kind of succession planning, and that is if it does not pass, it does give the district a year to start planning what a phase down might look like in concert with, okay, we have all of this infrastructure in place to go back to the voters in the general election. So there's pros and cons of the timing, and the board felt that the administration made a compelling case that going out a year early was persuasive.
Well, we always did go out a year early. And quite honestly, I didn't mean to jump in, Don.
Go.
There's never a perfect time. I remember in 2019, everyone came to me and said, is this the right time? The city of Scottsdale has a big ballot measure happening. I remember in the 2015-16 override, we were going out for our bond issuance at the same time. And people were saying, is that wise to go out with two things at the same time? So there's never going to be a perfect moment that you say, yes, let's ask the voters now.
I think you're super wise to be doing it now. The 24 ballot's going to be unbelievable. It's there's school board, there's city council, there's a mayor, every kind of county supervisor positions open, federal stuff. This thing would get lost on the ballot in 24. It really would. So I think it's really wise going out right now as a single issue.
Yeah, I was advocating for the devil's advocate there, but personally, I think it's brilliant to do it this way. Yeah, absolutely. Let's just have a discussion about the facts that are in front of us right now for our school district and not have it get confused with, talking about national economy a year from now.
I'm in another job that I do. I'm worried like heck about the 24 ballot just because it's going to be so crazy in 24. So to get this one under our belt and get it approved would be a huge impact for the schools.
And I'll just add also on that ballot is going to be 3 positions for our school board, for
That's
our
right.
governing board.
That's
So
right.
again, that would be noise that might unfairly impact a sincere consideration of an override renewal.
Campaign issue, right? Yeah, very good. We don't need that either. We got the board's approval. Let's go out and inform the community. Once they're informed, I think then they find out this is something we need to do for our schools, right?
Absolutely. And this should not be a political issue.
No.
This is an investment in your community, an investment in your teachers and your economy.
And your band teachers.
Your band teachers.
Come on, I support our band teachers. I'm a band guy.
There you go. You get some drums going in there. Man. Yeah. Well, it should not be a political issue, but these days everything is a political issue.
Yeah.
So this has been fantastic. I think we've really enlightened our listeners with some views on and some facts, which is the most important thing right now. And with this maintenance and operation, it's an operational revenue for the school district. Just think of it that way. That it funds people. Keep it simple, and boy, what an easy way it is to understand that, right, Kevin? That's what it's all about, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ken, you got analytics for us today?
I do, because earlier on, I think you were asking Patty about what she thought of the possibility of this being passed, and she said that generally our community supports schools and supports students and supports education. And she is absolutely right, because I got the data to back that up.
Cool.
And that is in 2022, last year, we were talking about what would be the DAA that we had last year. There were 25 different school districts that had bonds of either one sort or the other on the ballot. Of those, 20 passed and 5 did not. That's 80%.
Pretty good.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
So, 80% of the community, not just in Scottsdale, but across the state,
Right.
is all for supporting kids, supporting schools, and doing the thing they need to do to make it right, since we're so funded not as well as we need to be. Anyway, so that's really encouraging. I also did a little bit of research, and the stats I found were a little bit older. I wish I could have found something newer. But nationwide, 62 to 72% of school board bonds pass.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, so we're even higher than national average.
That's good.
But still, that's still pretty good that even across the country, people have the same type of sentiment. So I'm cautiously optimistic.
I like that. Unfortunately, we needed more here in Arizona because the legislature hasn't had a wake-up call, or at least they haven't paid attention to it, right? That's
Yeah,
maybe someday they will.
That's what somebody said at a meeting I was at one time. Like, I wish we didn't have to do this every single year, right? Wouldn't it be nice if we were funded right off the get-go and that we didn't have to have these conversations where people have to make decisions and there's consequences if they don't make the decision that we think they should.
Continued frustration for sure. Yeah. But we sure appreciate everything that you guys are doing, Libby and Patty, for our school districts, for our community. So thank you so much for your service and every way that you're doing it. You guys are just community heroes, and so we really appreciate the work that both of you do.
Thank you.
As a reminder to all of you, vote. You're going to get your ballot in the mail in the next couple of days. Vote. There's nothing worse than not voting, so please take an opportunity to vote. And then we'll be back with you next week for our next edition of Today and Tomorrow in Scottsdale.